screen is visible?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, let's start. Welcome everyone. Today we are doing session 3 in the Microsoft Dynamics 365 platform Convergence series. And this session is based on the business events framework. And we have Cameron Robinson and myself who will be presenting in this session. We appreciate everyone taking their time out on the weekend and joining us to drive these sessions. The objective is to learn and grow together. A quick disclaimer that the views expressed in these sessions are presented by the speakers based on their own experience, and they do not necessarily represent the views of their employers or Microsoft. For running these workshops, we are using trial environments. We are not using any customer's environment, and the sessions are recorded using Teams. So if you do not wish to consent to be a part of a recorded session, then this is a good time to disconnect. These sessions are brought to you in collaboration with 3 user groups based in Australia, New Zealand, India, and Pakistan. So the user groups are having common objective to bring all the Dynamics 365 professionals globally together, and so that they all can share, learn, and grow and learn from each other experience. So please join us on LinkedIn. You can find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. Join us, support us, and we will take this forward together. A quick summary of what we are trying to do in these series of sessions is we have 5 sessions. Today is the 3rd session. We started from on 25th September where we had a session on introduction to Dataverse. Last week we had Dynamics 365 platform Convergence. Today we are talking about business event. Then the next week will be session on dual right and virtual entities by Faisal and Amna. And on 23rd, there will be a session on data integrator and logic apps, which will be driven by Priyanka Garg and Mohammad Mustajab. So this is a quick schedule of our sessions. Just a quick summary of what we have done so far. In session 1, we talked about platform convergence. We talked about the whole idea behind why this is happening and what is the objective behind it. We talked about introduction to Dataverse, and Preeti showed us how to create tables, relations, roll-up fields, calculated fields in Dataverse, and we created a sample model-driven app which set the base for everyone with a common understanding of Dataverse. So a big round of applause for Preeti there. Thank you, Preeti, if you are in the session. Last week we did session 2, where we had Tim Shaw from Microsoft, Faisal from Barhead, and myself. We talked about the approach to convergence, what are the common principles about convergence, and what is the roadmap looking like. We did some demo on how the user interface is unifying between CE, finance and operations using Power Platform. We saw how we can embed model-driven apps and Power Apps in finance and operations UI. We also saw how we can take finance and operation UI and embed it into Teams. And then Tim and Faisal talked about their key learnings from recent implementations and how the future Dynamics 365 architects will look like. So thank you, Tim and Faisal, for coming on this stage and sharing your knowledge with the community. Today, we will be talking about business events, which I think most of the people might have heard who are from finance and operations background, but we will do a bit of a deep dive, talk about the concepts. We will also talk about what's coming in this space, especially with regards to how Dataverse platform is maturing to embrace this framework. Then we will do some summary and Q&A. We have kept total 90 minutes for this session, which will give us ample of time to do Q&A and discussions and brainstorm together. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat window. We can take them towards the end, or if it is really urgent, feel free to jump in at the right time. A quick introduction for the speakers who are presenting today. So we have Cameron Robinson and myself, Rachit, who are presenting in this session today. So my name is Rachit. I've been working into the implementation of Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, or AX, which was the previous name of the product, for more than 16 years now. And I'm currently working with PwC and based in Melbourne. I will now hand it over to Cameron to introduce himself and take us to the journey in this session. Over to you, Cameron.
Thanks, Rachit. That's fantastic. Put my camera on so you can see me. So look, I've been working with Dynamics for nearly 30 years, coming up to 30 years. My role now at Valrata is a pre-sales solution architect. So sitting across really all the business applications that Microsoft offer. And so while my rich experience has been in finance and operations, that's broadened out into field service, customer engagement, Business Central, and then into the broader stack of Power Platform, Teams, and all the other Office applications to sort of bring the entire Microsoft experience together. So I love it to death. Pretty enthusiastic about Dynamics, and probably will continue to do this, for the rest of my days. So looking forward to this opportunity of speaking with you all and sharing with you some of the experiences that I've had and this great topic of business events and where that's going. So with that, I'm going to present my screen. You should be able to see that, I hope. Yep. Understanding business events. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Great. All right. So I've got about 10 to 15 minutes. So keep me on track here, Rachit. Make sure I don't run over time too much. Okay. So what are we going to cover? So look, really want to just talk a little bit about what are business events and kind of what's its purpose and in the bigger picture and scheme of things. Then like to look at the concepts around business events. We'll talk a little bit about the various scenarios that we can use these business events. What are the benefits of business events, and show you some of its capability within the product. So we'll be able to see some of this in action and how it's being brought to the product and how we're actually working with it. So with that, where I would like to start is the digital feedback loop. You've probably all seen this a number of times. I really like coming back to this because what this does is it turns what we do from being a technical conversation to a business conversation. And what I mean by that is most businesses are split up into these four key business areas where we are empowering employees to be able to do their job. We're engaging with customers to be able to sell products and services. We're optimizing our business operations, and we're transforming products or services. And all of those are very much centered around a business process. But then there's this, at the center of it all is data. There's a system that's collecting data from all of these parts of the business, but the people that work in these parts of the business need feedback. They need to get, real-time insights into the part of the business that they work in. And the reason for bringing this up is because we're going to talk about business events and their role in the business process. And I think this is a really key point for a lot of businesses to make sure they stay true and clear about what are the business processes that are required to run this business. And once that's well understood, then all the underlying technology can then fall into place and enable that to happen in a really effective way. So how do we achieve that complex spider web of digital feedback? Well, here I'm just representing in those four areas some typical process streams. So if it's for customers, it might be the order to cash process. For operations, it might be the procure to pay process. Transforming products might be the storage to distribution and being able to get that distributed out through the network. And for empowering employees, we've got this hire to a retire business process. And these processes are the end-to-end aspect of a business. And in order to support these processes, we're using lots of different technology to support that. And Microsoft have a incredibly rich tapestry and library of business applications that we then bring together to support those business processes. So if we maybe trim this down a little bit and just focus on the D365 applications for the context of this conversation, we've moved away from maybe just focusing on one particular product. So some businesses might have started off with maybe customer service product and then built out its capability and extended that to maybe do more than what it originally was designed to do. Then what might have come along is then they've maybe introduced supply chain into their business, or we want to bring in finance into that business or into the application stack. And all of a sudden, what we now have is 1, 2, 3, 4 different applications trying to support these business processes that we're seeing at the top. And it's been my experience, certainly in the last 3 or 4 years, that with where we're going with connected business applications and the convergence story is we're better understanding the business process and then use the right tool in the application stack to do the job, and not try and have an application do more than it's capable of. And so we're now moving from being in a single application to now using multiple applications that can then all start working together. So with that in mind, you have to excuse me, I've got a tickle. With where we're going with the business events is, if we can now have a picture of the end-to-end business processes, we now use the business applications for what they're built to do, but now we can extend those. And one of the best tools to use to extend any of these applications is now the Power Platform. So again, this paradigm shift of let's fix it inside finance and operations. Let's get the developers in, because it's actually really easy to extend, and we'll do our X++ code and we'll build it out. And that worked for a while, but the problem is the total cost of ownership gets impacted, and it started inhibiting the ability to upgrade those products. Where now, if we can contain that extensibility outside in something like the Power Platform, then we're able to allow those core applications to continue to develop and grow and become better at what they do, but are not compromised by any extensibility that's taken place in the Power Platform. So this was just really another perspective on the whole approach to convergence. At the end of the day, these tools are here so that we can bring about the convergence of the business applications that Microsoft offer through the Dynamics 365 family of products and the Power Platform. So, business events. So there's the concept here is based on, I guess, that fundamental notion that in any business system, you're capturing data and it's being stored in your system, but then there's a business action that takes place that results in a business event. So as some action is required, that triggers an event, and then that new event may have further additional action. And then that action may trigger yet another follow-up event. And really, businesses are just made up of this series of sequences of business actions followed by business events. and it just continues to cause this chain reaction within business systems. And so by being able to support that paradigm and that concept that businesses are going through this evolving action and event, cause and effect type cycle, if we can provide tools and services in a cloud-based environment that supports that, then the business solutions that we're presenting to our customers are going to be a lot more flexible and dynamic, and be able to grow with that business as it becomes a bigger operation. So essentially, looking at what is business events, and as Microsoft Docs talks about, business events provide this mechanism that external systems can receive notifications from, in this case, finance and operations. And as a result, they can then perform these business actions in response to events. So it's really this mechanism to support that chain reaction of events and actions. So some of the concepts we're going to talk about is to support this, really, we need a catalogue of events that are supported. And you'll see when we get into this that those events are then categorised and grouped together based on whether maybe they're alert driven, or they're business process driven, or they're workflow driven, or whatever it might be. So it's important that there is a catalogue, a library of business events that are supported, that then can be published and made available. Another concept is endpoints, which basically is the definition of where that an endpoint that's going to subscribe and start using any of the business events. There's the processing of the business events, and then there's the monitoring of any errors that might appear. So key to convergence here is that a number of things that you would have heard about, that we've been talking about, and that we're going to present in this series relies on all of these tools coming together to allow convergence to actually come about, so that these tools are available to customers and partners to solve these business problems. So what's important here is we need a combination of business events, dual write, data integrator, virtual entities, data entities. All of this technology, it doesn't work in isolation on its own. They actually are complementary to each other. And this table here that I've sourced from Rachel Profit is a really good example of showing you that different technology has strengths and weaknesses, and therefore it's important you're using the right piece of technology to address the problem that you're working with. So, trying to use, dual write for real-time transactional data is not a good idea. It's near real-time, but it's not built for high-volume transactional data, where virtual entities is possibly better for that, or a custom-built logic app. And so it's really important to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the different products that we're going to show you in the next couple of weeks, so that you're clear on you're very clear on making sure we're using the right technology to solve the particular problem. What I thought I'd just talk through is some scenarios where we use business events. So not really focusing on dual write or virtual entities, but specifically around business events. And so this is an example of finance and operations, working with customer engagement. And here it might be the scenario of purchase order transactions, where we want to synchronise purchase orders between the two different systems. Why might we want to do that? One particular example is within field service. You might have a field service supervisor who's responsible for a team of field service technicians, and he or she may need to be able to raise a purchase request within field service. They're starting to plan the work that needs to be done for the technicians. They've realised that the technician is not got a certain part in his van, and therefore wants to raise a purchase request. So because the field service supervisor works in the field service application, he needs to raise that purchase request. However, we need to make sure that that purchase request makes its way into finance and operations, so that the planning manager or the master plan manager can then start working out what do I need to purchase in? When do I need to purchase it in? Maybe I've got stock available in my my main stores area, and so it can then make sure that that purchase request makes its way into finance and operations, so that the procurement process can then kick in. Another scenario might be the warehouse store manager receipts a purchase order, but the people working in field service, be that the supervisor or the technicians, need to get visibility that that purchase order has been receipted. So after we've done the receipt within finance and operations, and they've receipted that purchase order, we need to make sure that we can trigger the appropriate transaction across to field service, so that the people working in the field service screens can see that the product has now been receipted and is now available for the technician to start using that. And then the last one here is around when the field service tech is working with his job, there's an area in his system to indicate what products are on his work order, and that sometimes can only really become available when the products have arrived and they're in stock for him to use. So it's, again, important that there's that connection back with finance and operations, where all the warehousing and inventory management has taken place. A second scenario might be around transfer order status. So again, working between finance and operations and, in this case, field service, the warehouse manager might ship a order to go to the field services van, the gentleman's van, and so he'll raise a transfer order in order to make that enable that transaction to take place. That's going to create a transfer order in field service. Now the field technician will then want to receipt that transfer order, and we then need to make sure that the appropriate transfer, the equivalent transfer order in finance and operations has been receipted, so that all of our inventory transactions within finance and operations are in sync with what's happening in field service. So again, this is another really practical scenario that we would be using business events to allow this to happen. Similar sort of story around inventory stock levels. This is a real challenge between finance and operations and field service or customer engagement, keeping the two systems in sync with their inventory. And so again, a scenario might be that the storeman receipts stock against an order in finance and operations, but he's receiving it into the field technician's van. And so in doing so, we need to make sure that then the system updates the van's stock level within field service. The field service technician, he may want to be able to check his stock. So he'll be able to do that because we've done this update from a receipt situation. But equally, the gentleman working in his van may want to be able to do a stock inquiry and go, well, look, I know I've got X stock in my van, but where else is there some stock? Because maybe I'm running low, or in the event that this job needed me to get some more, where could I go to get that? And so in this case, where you would be maybe using virtual entities to be able to get a broader understanding of where is the stock other than just in my van, maybe in nearby storage locations that I can then maybe drive to and arrange to get the stock from. So there are a bunch of scenarios that business events would become really effective. And these scenarios are not suited to dual write. Apart from this last one at the end here, they're not really suited to virtual entities. And so it's a really good way of just trying to maybe put some perspective around when to use business events versus using some of the other technology that's available. Okay. The quick summary on the benefits of business events. Business events, because these are basically looking at a process that might happen within finance and operations. So a business event might be a purchase order confirmation, or it might be the approval of a purchase requisition. It might be changing a transfer order to shipped. This is the concept of a business event. Now, these sorts of things, if we can now expose these in a way that are not only available within FinOps, but also now available externally, we can now expose these to the Power Platform. And we're going to see the power of that in a minute. Expose these to APIs. It allows us to significantly increase our extensibility options. And the beauty of extensibility is we can enhance the user's experience of this business application without customizing the core application. We're extending its capability through the Power Platform, through extending what's possible in the solution. And that makes a big difference to organisations when they're looking at total cost of ownership. We can minimise coding within finance and operations. And again, that's a real win when it comes to being able to do continuous updates on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. And the other real strength here is we can align to the core business logic of finance and operations, and this is well represented through, say, workflow examples. So there's some of the key benefits of business events and what it brings to the whole discussion. A couple of considerations. Business events can be consumed by Power Automate, Service Bus, Event Grid, and a number of other endpoint types. It is important to note customers need to bring their own subscriptions, though, to be able to access these tools. So they need to be able to, be suitably licensed for Power Automate, the Azure services such as Service Bus and Event Grid and those other areas. Business events can be activated at all legal entities or at specific legal entities. So that gives quite a lot of flexibility where maybe you've got multi-legal entities, but you only need this sort of capability in specific legal entities, maybe not in a consolidated legal entity, but you do need it in an operational legal entity. Business events are set up with unique endpoints or multiple endpoints, but we'll see that in operation. So some key considerations there when with working with business events. So with that, Rachit, hopefully I'm not run over too much. I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Cameron. I will now take it forward. So thanks for explaining the whole idea and the value of business event framework. I think business events framework is one of the feature which is heavily utilized now. Since this feature has been released and every implementation I have been part of, there is a flavor of business event. So I think this is really catching a lot of attention from the customers, and the solution architects are considering it. So what I'll do is I'll just share my screen and I'll show some action of how the business events look like. Let me know when you can see my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Perfect. So guys, what I will be talking about is I'll show in finance and operations how the business event parameters and catalog form looks like, how we can configure an endpoint, and what are the different type of endpoints we can configure in finance and operations. We'll do a quick demo to understand the capabilities and the power of the whole ecosystem, which is building business events. And after that, I'll hand it over back to Cameron to talk about what's coming up in Dataverse. So I'll share my finance and operations environment. I'll just refresh it. So before we start performing business actions, I'll show you how it looks from the setup perspective. So under system administration, those who are oldies in Dynamics, like those people who like to go through the detailed path, there is a business event section in the setup area of system administration, which is hiding somewhere. Let me expand again here. Here. So under business events, you have business event catalogs and business event parameters. So we can add them to favorite, and I'll quickly show you. First, I'll show you what the catalog means. So catalog is a type of a workspace in finance and operations terminology, where you can see what are all the business events available out of the box. So when you open this form, it looks a bit different to other finance and operations screens, but the reason is because it has a lot of things to show. So what you see here is the catalog tab page, where you see all the business events available, and they have been categorized into various segments. And this categorization is helping us to understand that a particular business event falls under a particular category. It doesn't really change the way it behaves, but it's for people to understand that a business event is of a type batch. So here you can see that when a bad job has been cancelled or failed or finished, we can trigger a business event. Similarly, there is a category for alerts, which is very powerful, and it is very generic in nature because alerts can be set up across multiple modules. So it's not tied to accounts receivable or inventory management. You can set up alerts in all the modules in Dynamics. And this is where we can leverage the power of alerts to trigger business events. And even in alerts, there are two different type of alerts, which is important to understand. One event is when the alert rule is triggered, which means, for example, a new record is created or updated in a particular table, or the value of a particular field has changed from A to B, then you can trigger these alerts. The second category of alerts is a due date alert, and this is important in scenarios where you want to send out a notification when a date is due on any record. So for example, if your invoice is due in 3 days and you want to send out a notification, or if your vendor certificate has expired, or if your contract is coming to an end. So these due date alerts can be triggered and configured in a way to enable such scenarios where you want to send out a notification when a particular date is approaching or it is due. And that's the meaning of a due date alert in Dynamics. So we have capabilities to trigger business events based on alerts. Then here you can see on different modules, we have business events, for example, when a free text invoice is posted. So this goes on, and then there is a huge list of workflow type business events, which enables us to take the workflow approvals and actions outside finance and operations, and users can approve workflow, for example, through their mobile. So we can consume this event in a Power Automate and send a mobile notification. So we have these different categories here, and If we come on the right-hand side, we can see a description of the business event, a much more detailed description, which cannot be put in a column. So this is a short description. This is a long description of the business event. And then you see here is these are the field and label which are passed as the business event information to the outside system, which means when your, for example, invoice approval journal is posted, this business event is triggered, this information will flow out of Dynamics. And this information contains some unique identifiers like your legal entity, your invoice ID, purchase order number, which are unique in nature. And using this information, you can then call back to Dynamics to retrieve more information. One key thing here is you can also download schema. So when you click on download schema, you can basically get a JSON sample payload, which you can share it with the integration team, and they get an understanding of what type of payload structure will they receive from finance and operations when this alert is triggered. So this was the catalog screen. You can activate a particular business event from here. The second screen is the endpoint screens. This is the screen where you see all the endpoints which are configured in your instance. So this is basically the endpoint name and what is the type of the endpoint. If you click on new endpoint, here you can see what are various endpoints supported by Dynamics application. So here we can see, as Cameron was mentioning, that we can connect business events to Azure Service Bus, topics, event grids, Azure functions here. And you can also send out notification to blob storage. It's also worth mentioning that you can also create your own custom endpoints. So if your enterprise is using a specific platform where you want to connect or send out business events, you can achieve that through extension framework. So you can create new endpoints in the system. There is a video which I published on how to configure Azure Service Bus for this finance and operations. I'm not going too deep into configurations, otherwise we derail from the topic, but I'll share the link where you can see how you configure Service Bus or event grids to consume the business event payloads. So this is around endpoints. Then active events is the list of business events which are currently activated in this instance. So if you come here, you can see, okay, I have two workflow. I have two business events activated. One is when the purchase order is received, it's activated in this legal entity. So this is where Cameron mentioned that these are legal entity specific. So if you want to trigger business events for a particular legal entity, you have to select that in which legal entity, which events are activated. And here you can also see that which is the endpoint, which is consuming that business event. Then we go to inactive events. This is where if you have deactivated and active events, you can see that list. And then the last one is around errors. So this is where if the business event framework is not able to talk to the endpoint and it tries a couple of times, and if it's not able to talk, then it saves it in this queue from where you can then trigger the payload to be resent again. So this is what you see on the setup form. I will quickly show you how the parameters screen look, because that's also important to understand for business events. So this is where you define your retry count. So if your business event framework is not able to talk to the endpoint, it will retry how many number of times and how many events are allowed per event, and what is the wait time between each retry. So you can configure these settings through the UI. And there is also a business event batch job. So if you want to control the sending of payloads from finance and operations, so you can use the business event batch jobs to control that thing. All right. So this was around the setup part. What we will do in this particular demo is I've configured a business event in Power Automate for this. I'll quickly show you how that event is currently looking like, and then I will show you how it looks when we perform it. So basically, we have a series of steps here that when a business event occurs in finance and operations. So what we have done is this is a finance and operations connector available in Power Automate. There is a new type of connector coming up, which Cameron will talk about. But here we are talking that when a purchase order is received in USMF, you parse the JSON. And this is where you use the sample payload from the finance and operations. Then what I'm doing actually here is we are doing a call back to Dynamics to get more details of what has been received. So here we are actually passing some key information from the payload which I have received from finance and operations, sending it back to Dynamics to tell, hey, okay, tell me all the lines which were received. And then I'm doing some HTML file creation and some formatting, adding some CSS and sending it out as an email. So let's see this in action. So what I'll do is I'll quickly go to a purchase order, which I have set up for this demo. And I have already confirmed it. I'll just post a receipt list just to see how it looks. So we go here, go to receive. I'll just post a product receipt. And let me just give it a number, PR, let's say, click OK. One key thing is when your business event is activated, and in case it fails to talk to your endpoint, it won't stop you to perform your business process. It will let you continue to do with the business processes. It will basically log it into the business event error log. So I'm posting a product receipt, and I hope to receive an email soon. So it could be a scenario where your products have been received and you want to send out a notification to the employees that, hey, your products are ready to be received and collected from the service desk or from the collection center. So I've just received this mail now. So here you can see I've received a nice mail which says your purchase order is received. This is the number, and I have got a tabular information of all the things which were received as a part of that product receipt. So previously, before business events and these capabilities were not existing, we used to customize Dynamics to do these type of user experiences where we have to enable email templates in the sprint management, but now this is all configurable things here. So here we have seen how we got the email, and also if we go back to our flow, we can see history. So let me just quickly go there and see it just ran 57 seconds ago. And here, if we take a deep look, we will see that all the steps were successfully completed. And here you can see the payload which was received. So we have the event ID, which is unique. We have got the journal number, the receipt journal number, we have got the legal entity, the vendor account. And then what I did, we parsed the JSON, we took out some information, we did a call back to Dynamics to get more information, and then we populated the table, created some CSS, and then we basically send an email. So this is one demo which we wanted to show to highlight the capabilities. And another key thing is once your payload is in Power Automate or Event Grid or Logic App, you have got the benefit of using the whole connector ecosystem of Power Platform. So you're not just limited to sending emails and push notifications. You can actually post on Teams, do everything with all these connectors you have. And this connector based library is increasing day by day. ISVs are adding their own connectors, as well as Microsoft is publishing their own connectors. So that's what the idea of Convergence ties back to all these capabilities, that you don't have to solve all the problems in finance and operations. Send your payload out, leverage all this benefit of having things in the Power Platform. So this was around the demo part, which I had. I'll quickly come back to my slide. So what we have seen is how the catalog looks like. What are the different navigation options on the business event catalog? What are the different business event endpoints available for configuration? HTTPS is used when you want to call a Azure function or any other web function. We have pasted a sample payload. This is what a sample payload looks like. This is from the free text invoice posted business event, but most of them have the unique information you need to pull back from Dynamics. It's worth mentioning that we can extend these payloads. We can create our new business events to cater for your scenarios, but we should not abuse these capabilities, because if you add, let's say, 100 fields in the payload, it becomes too heavy and chokes the whole process. So try to add more fields if you have to, which are adding value to the next steps, not the whole end-to-end process. So that's just another recommendation from my side. But that's what I wanted to show. And with that, I will hand it over back to Cameron to talk with us about how business events are coming into Dataverse and what capabilities are coming in the roadmap. Over to you, Cameron.
Great. Thanks, Rachit. That's fantastic. Great demo. Really like the way you pulled all that together and how it links back in as it goes through that workflow. It can do the calls back to get further information. I think that's that works really, really well. So thanks for that.
Thank you. No problem.
Okay, so what we're going to move on and talk about now is business events within Dataverse and kind of what does that mean? So what I really want to go through is introduce some concepts around business events in the context of Dataverse, the benefits of doing this, talk a bit about CRUD or CRUD events in Dataverse, business events in Dataverse, and some scenarios, and a bit of the future and what's next on the roadmap. This is what we're seeing now is the culmination of work that's been happening over the last 1 to 2 years to really build up this convergence story. And I think in many respects it's the features that when things like dual write and virtual entity first came along, we were hoping were already in the solution. But for what many different reasons, we came from a client service solution to now being a cloud-based solution, and bringing all of that capability into the cloud has meant that this has been a process of evolution to get the product to where it is today. And I think we're now seeing it operate in a really mature way. So business events in Dataverse, what's sort of going on here? So I think it's important to think back to some of those earlier diagrams I showed where you've got an end-to-end business process, and to support that you could potentially be using any of the Microsoft business applications to solve that problem. And so while it was great to see what Rachit showed us in the context of FinOps, some businesses are using FinOps and they're using customer engagement and they're using Teams and they're using HR, they're using lots of different products. And therefore, how do you then start to solve these sort of business problems in a consistent manner? So you want to be able to use workflow, for instance, like we saw Power Automate. But you don't want to have to go, well, I've got to code it this way for FinOps, and then I've got to code it another way for HR, and then another way for CE. What this is trying to now start to bring together is the ability of both business applications and the Power Platform and APIs being able to work in a more harmonious way. So this sort of represents your different business applications in the blue, be it Business Central or Finance and Operations or Customer Engagement or some other third-party product. And coming back to this business events concept, they are all looking for or are all triggering business events in their systems. And so if we can expose those business events within the Dataverse paradigm or ecosystem, then we've got access to be able to build out the Power BI. We can be doing data feeds to Data Lake. We can be building advanced AI analytical models. We can be plugging in a bot. And it's all reading off this common Dataverse data set or data service, if I want to maybe call it that. And so what are some of the aspects to make this possible? Well, we've got the business events that we've been talking about from both a FinOps perspective, but also from a Dataverse perspective. There's a new concept that I want to talk a little bit about, and that is data events. I'm going to show you what that looks like, but essentially business events are looking for a business process to trigger something, where a data event is looking for a create, an update, a delete trigger to trigger something to take place. And again, there's a time and a place to use both of those types of event triggers. And then we've also got the concept of being able to share information between the two different applications, and that might be through some of the things that we saw last week, where you are using virtual entities to expose finance data within customer engagement, or you're embedding model-driven apps within finance and operations, so that you're sharing that data across the business applications. And this comes back to a concept of making sure you're using the right tool to do the right job. So if you go back to the scenario we had of the field service supervisor, well, his world is in field service. So he doesn't want to be flicking into finance and operations or into any other sort of system. He just wants to be working in his field service screens. But to do his job, sometimes he has to dip his vision into what's happening in finance and operations. So if we can embed that into his user experience, then it becomes a much more powerful and practical solution for that user. So quite often we do demonstrations. I'm sure you have all done this, and you're flicking between finance and operations, and then you're flicking into customer engagement. And a really good way to approach that is to go, well, in my role as field service supervisor, the screens I use are the field service screens. But in my role as accounts payable clerk, well, the screens I use is the accounts payable workspace. And if you can take more that sort of approach, then it becomes less obvious that you're switching between business applications. You're actually switching between more appropriate workspaces to do the job that you're doing. So what are some of these key concepts in order for events to become presented in Dataverse? Well, some of the technology that's come about now is Dataverse now is automatically included with finance and operations. I'm going to show you that in a minute on how that's put together. But when you now spin up a finance and operations environment, Dataverse is automatically generated with that. And it's there so it can facilitate this bringing together of Dynamics business applications and the Power Platform. We're seeing a movement with a change in the admin center. So we're all, if we've used finance and operations, we are very familiar with LCS and administrating the environments that way. But in order to allow this convergence to come together, then we're seeing some of the LCS capability now being migrated into Admin Center. Dual write. Dual write actually what it does is the mappings that dual write defines and operates by can all now be packaged up in a portable solution. That if you've worked with CE and built a solution, you can actually now take your dual write mappings and put them into a portable solution, and then that makes it portable to be able to move around to different environments. Virtual entities. In the past, you would have to manually configure those. They're now going to be automatically included as part of an implementation. Business events are now available in Dataverse, essentially through custom API technology. You can now build out capabilities within Dataverse, within your customer engagement solutions, and Dataverse now has access to the business events catalogue that we saw in finance and operations that Rachit showed us earlier. They are now exposed and automatically available through Dataverse. And this comes back to this, this concept of if we can expose this through this common data service of Dataverse, then it becomes a lot more accessible to a lot more systems. There's data events, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And then from a developer's perspective, there's now a plugin registration tool that allows developers in the Power Platform space to build out plugins that can access these data events and business events directly within the code, which is also a really, really powerful way of exposing that capability in the Dataverse environment. So all of these things I've touched on. Did you have a question? No.
Yeah, I think your video is off camera. I'm not sure if you.
Oh yeah, thank you, thank you. So the reason I've gone through all of those, I just wanted to just take a moment to pause to go, well, look, this is all great, all of this new technology coming along, but you know, what is the purpose of it? And I come back to you know, a theme common across this series is this approach to convergence. And a really good way of looking at this is if we are basically, if the way to look at convergence is how do we bring the business applications within D365 closer, get closer alignment to the Power Platform. That's essentially what convergence is about. And what we're trying to do is break down the barriers for customers to be able to access the Power Platform to extend the capability of their core business applications. And a good way of looking at this is you want the core business applications to do what they were originally designed to be built to do. So your finance system does your finance, your HR does your HR, but then those 20 or 15 or 10% of things that the core application can't do, that's when we dip into the Power Platform. But we can only do that if we've got convergence between business applications and the Power Platform. And so across all of these areas, be it data and having access to business events, be it through security, storage, data lakes, blob storage, databases, the admin center experience and the developer experience, these experiences need to converge and be very similar for both finance and operations and other business applications, as well as the Power Platform. So with that, what I want to just show you is a couple of examples of how this is converging around the admin center, talk a little bit about business events and data events, and then finish off with the plugin registration tool. So just to recap, the benefits of Dataverse is it reduces the barriers to entry for customers to fully harness the Power Platform. It accesses the full suite of tools across dual write, virtual entity, business events, data events. We've got the common admin center, and ultimately what we're trying to do is empower the business solutions to be able to unlock the Power Platform into the solution landscape. Okay, so going to flick across into LCS. This is just showing you. Many of you may have already seen this and been across it, but essentially, what we have here is an environment. It's just a VLab environment here that's stood up for finance and operations. But you'll see here we've got a section which contains the Power Platform Dataverse connection. So this is automatically, you actually have the choice at point of provisioning the environment. Do you want to create this connection at the time of provisioning, or do you want to come back later and do it? But this essentially is what is available now on any new finance and operations implementation, and this will then automatically stand up your new Dataverse. Now, what that means is if you're used to working with Dataverse and customer engagement, you would have the admin center. So I've just flicked across to the admin center, and the admin center now has my new environment for the Dataverse, but this is also now representing the FinOps environment as well. So you'll see that on this one screen, if I go to my environments and I jump into this particular one, you'll see here that we have the URL, which is the URL for CRM or customer engagement or Dataverse, whichever you prefer to call, and then the URL to finance and operations. And so you can now actually see how these two environments are related to each other. And more we can administer some of the other things. So we're able to maybe come in and start administering user access. We can come in, so if we come into settings, I can actually now start accessing users' permissions. And this is users across finance and operations and CE or Dataverse. And so we're not having to flick into finance and operations to do this. We can actually now administer this all through this admin center experience. So it's one of the examples of how Convergence is bringing this experience together into the same place. Now, the thing about Dataverse being provisioned automatically, it comes with a 1 GB capacity, and then there's extension options to that. So I've just put the link in there to the Microsoft pricing guide, which gives a really good breakdown as to what the limitations and capacity is around Dataverse and how you would extend that if you needed to. We've talked about the admin center. You'll notice too it's being renamed now to the Power Platform Admin Center rather than it being the D365 Admin Center. But essentially that's where we now have that ability to now, at the moment, it's pretty limited what's coming in here from a finance and operations perspective, but it's starting to present a bit of a picture that in time we're seeing, there's likely to be more and more of this coming into the picture. Now, next I want to just touch on that to disappear. There we go. I'd like to talk about the concept of data data events. So when we were, Rachit was showing us the business catalogue, we saw the business events catalogue, and these are all categorised based on essentially workflow activity, based on business processes that take place in the application, or based on workflow events that are in the system. Now, there's also the alert capability, and the alert process is an important one to be familiar with, because quite often these business events, well, not often, but you'll get a situation where there's no existing business event to support the business process that you're trying to maybe expose to an external service or subscriber. Now, you've got two options there. One is you can, or maybe three options. One is you could then go, well, look, could I, instead of, if the business process is not there, maybe I can build an alert, just a typical alert in the system, and that then the business event catalogue can be triggered based on that alert. So, for instance, a change in status, or the shipment of a transfer order, as an example. The alternative to using alerts would be to do an extension to finance and operations and expose that business process in FinOps to be a published business event, and then it would appear in the catalogue. So you've got two options there, but that second option relies on the core application being customised and extended. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it needs to be properly assessed that it is it makes commercial sense to do that. Now, the data events is this new concept, and when it's enabled within your environment, and it's a new feature that's just come out in, I believe it came out in 21, I believe. But this data event catalogue tab now appears, and what we're now seeing is essentially CRUD, create, update, delete data events. So I'm just kind of flick down to one that's going to be relevant. But if I come down to, say, customers, because I was just working with customers earlier. So if I'm coming to maybe customers, here we go, this is what I wanted to find. Here I've got my customer group, create, delete, and update. So these are now, they kind of work like a business event, but instead of being triggered off the business event taking place, these will be triggered based on a create, delete, or update. Now, we've been able to do this in Dataverse and the CDS and customer engagement for a while now, but just recently we now can do this in finance and operations. And so by exposing these CUD events, we can then make them available into Dataverse, and therefore they're now accessible for Power Automate, APIs, or any other external third party that wants to be able to access these triggered events that can take place. And again, you go through the same process with a business event where you need to activate it, and in doing so, it's going to appear in your active events. Okay, now with that, I thought I'd just flick across and have a look at, again, this is all about the concept of making all of this available in Dataverse. Now, Rachit earlier was showing us, I'm in the Power Automate flow area, and if I was to build a new flow, one of the early steps in building that new flow is you need to notify where's this trigger point coming from. And the great work that Rachit had done is he had used the FinOps connector that was going to be looking for a trigger to take place. But this has now been superseded or enhanced with the Dataverse business event. So essentially, the Dataverse business event is now represented by this new icon, the new Dataverse icon, and when an action is performed. So by selecting this, what we're now able to do is get access to all of the business event catalogues or event catalogues, be it the data events, that are now exposed through finance and operations. Now, remember here, we actually choose which of these we want to activate. So out of the box, when you come in and start this, you're not going to see every single business event available. It's only the business events that you choose to turn on for this application. So that just gives you some control as to how much of this you're choosing to expose. As you can imagine, to sort of turn everything on for everyone would create quite an administrative and performance overhead. So that then just limits that down. But this is the big shift and difference where we're now moving away from Power Automate, in this case, plugging just into FinOps, but now Power Automate can now plug into Dataverse, and it doesn't matter where the data came from. Dataverse can then go, okay, is this a FinOps business event? Is this a Business Central business event? Or is it some other business events from some other business application, Teams, email, could be any sort of activity that's going on out there. Okay. All right, so the last thing I wanted to touch on was the ability to, from a developer's perspective, extend this capability into the Power Platform development environment. Now, this is now available through Visual Studio Marketplace, and I think it's taken a few incarnations, but I believe this is the most recent one in preview, where this is the tool that you would need to install into your Visual Studio. And by installing this into Visual Studio, you're then now able to access the custom APIs and the exposed business and data events that finance and operations are exposing into Dataverse. Now, you have to excuse me here, my environment expired. I've got a preview environment of this that I've been working with. I've got some screen grabs. They're a little fuzzy, but you'll get the idea of it. So here in my Visual Studio, I've installed the tool, and so in my Power Platform Explorer view, I'm able to now see under event catalogues the finance and operations business events. Now, here, what I can now do is, now that I've published the appropriate business events, I'm now going to be able to visualize those and actually access them through this browser experience. And then I can drill into these and say, in this particular example, I've drilled into the customer groups, and you can see how now I've got access to those data cut events, and I can then start adding them to my solution and building out my code based on these trigger points. So some really powerful tools here now that allows the developer now to continue developing that Visual Studio experience that they're already familiar with, and they can build out the connectivity to the business events and the data events that are now being exposed through the Dataverse. Now, it's really important to understand that to be able to use this capability as a developer, it's important that the Power Platform connection to Dataverse has been installed and implemented in finance and operations. If you haven't connected finance and operations into Dataverse, then all of this capability is not exposed. So this actually relies on a number of the metadata stores to be sitting in Dataverse for this to be able to pick that up and to be able to expose it and make it available through the Visual Studio environment. Cool. I thought I might just wrap up with a little bit of the future development, and then we can maybe, I'm not sure if it's worth pausing for questions at this point, or we do that at the end. But you know, essentially, as this is a bit of an older version of this table from probably about 12 months ago, when Sunil was presenting his vision as to what we're trying to achieve, over the future periods, and we're really at a point where we've been able to achieve up into item number 5 here, but we're now got the dual right enabled and working. We've got virtual entities working. We have now the finance and operations business events now available in Dataverse. The CRUD events that based on data triggers are now exposed and certainly in preview, and I believe imminently will be GA. We are at a point where now the developers now, through using the extension, can now access the business events through the Power Platform a registration tool, which then allows, again, the ability to create these asynchronous connections between different systems. And really what's next on the agenda is to move into more of a, I guess, bringing the two products even closer together. So the first one is a common event model. So in the same way we have a common data service in the form of Dataverse, and essentially what this has been trying to achieve is bring, have a common data pattern and structure, exposing data from not only customer engagement, but finance and operations, business central, human resource, all of this data, even though that they're sitting in their own Azure databases to support that business application, we're now able to expose that data into Dataverse across all those business applications. And you can imagine the power that brings. Even project operations, something I experienced recently was with project operations and where that has gone with being able to do project plans. The project plans now are being stored in Dataverse. So when you build out a Microsoft project Gantt chart and you resource that in that experience, all of that data is being stored directly in Dataverse. Then that is then available in that common data service to be able to then build out enhanced user experiences, push it out into the data lake, expose it to third-party applications. So it really is developing into quite a powerful story. Well, if you can imagine, if we could achieve the same concept, but now with events, with a catalogue of business events across finance and operations and HR and project operations and Business Central. So that's the next vision, to be able to pull this together to make it easier to be able to access business events across all those business applications. And then item number 7 there is a concept of, when necessary, be able to create an integration pipeline that is synchronous in nature. And essentially what that, there are some very unique and specific scenarios that you might be triggering something to happen from within. Something's happened in finance and operations. Business Dataverse is monitoring it. It picks up that it's happened and it wants to actually perform a synchronous execution, and it needs to successfully get a response back for it to complete. This is an area where the Dataverse is moving into, that we can build that in a way that we can have a synchronous integration. It would be very specific scenarios, but there are scenarios where that's really going to be important for that to happen. So that's a bit on the future. This link to this YouTube is actually a really good watch. Sunil presented this probably 6 months ago, but a lot of the content is very relevant, and it really provides quite a good insight with some snazzy demos at the same time. All right. Rachit, shall I hand back to yourself?
Yep, I'll summarize. Thanks, Cameron. That was really insightful and a lot of information. I am sure the future is exciting and a lot of new capabilities are getting GA, and they are in the last stage of preview. So hopefully soon everyone will be able to get their hands on to these features. But it's really setting the foundation for these groups and people who are attending and who will be watching these videos to understand the vision and how to build solutions for your customers using these frameworks. So a quick summary is about the benefit of business event is that it gives you the near real-time business process integrations across systems. It improves your processes, improves your cash flow, and increase productivity. So it's just a nice summary here. So stay tuned, keep following Microsoft channels and handles where they are publishing. Before I talk about next session, let's take a pause and we see if we have any questions. Are there any questions, guys? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask. If I know some people are not able to write in chat window. Yes, Abhishek.
Thanks, Rachit. Thank you, first of all, for everyone. I mean, it's a great learning platform. Thank you for creating this. Just a quick question on maybe what is the best approach? Because we can do it in multiple ways, the same thing. We can create those business endpoints through Power Automate, through a service bus, through HTTP, and many different ways. But what are the key factors which and when to use what? If someone can give an insight on that, that will be helpful. Thank you.
Yes, I can help with that. So early on in the presentation, I put up a slide. I'm going to just re-present it if I can find it quickly. It's a really good question, because when I first was trying to get my head around all this, I kind of was taking a view that, oh, I see. So now that we've got dual write, we don't need data integrator anymore. And then virtual entities came along and I thought, oh, we've got virtual entities. We don't need dual write anymore. But it was the wrong way of looking at it. So one of the reasons I put this table in is to help start to get an understanding of the strengths and weaknesses. So my recommendation is, firstly, really do your homework on what dual write is good at, what virtual entity is good at, what the use of business events and therefore, you know, what they're good at. Some of the factors that you are going to need to consider is these things down the left side here. So the speed, does it need to be synchronous or not? Is it bidirectional or not? What are you doing with data? Does it have to be duplicated, or does it just need to be visible? And what's the size of your transactions? How many transactions are you having to handle in this type of transaction? So there's some of the, that would be a really good place to start. And once you can articulate and get a measure around that, that will start providing some guidance as to which is the better way to go. Because, you know, you don't want to be putting high volume transactions through dual write, right? But then you don't want to be using virtual entity if the application goes offline. So if you've got a CE application that needs to go offline for a short period of time, then you can't use virtual entities. So there's some of the things that you would need to consider. Now, the other really important factor here is making sure that you appreciate the end-to-end business process. So I come back to this picture because if you don't understand the end-to-end process you're trying to solve, you are at risk of choosing the wrong option to solve the problem. And so just make sure you've got good context around what it is you're solving. If you understand the context, then you can look at these metrics and then start to understand, okay, now I know I'm using the right sort of tool.
Okay, thank you so much, Cameron. It was really helpful. Thank you.
There's some very good, Rachel Profit has done a very good series on the Power Platform and finance and operations, where she's taken the time to explain good scenarios for dual write, good scenarios for virtual entity. I'd recommend you go searching those and watch them as a ground to learn the strengths and weaknesses of the different technology.
Right. Thanks, Cameron. Thanks, Abhishek. So guys, if you search in Google Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation Tech Talk videos, you will get a link, and also you can search on YouTube. I've also shared the link of the video which Sunil shared last year, which Cameron was mentioning. Cool, we have a few more minutes. Anyone else has any other question which they want to open up, or if they want to unmute and share their experience of using business events? I'm sure some people in the call have also used it and they want to share something with the community. This is the right time. Okay.
Myself, Ajay here. In starting the session, we've seen the business events catalog, and then what are the fields we'll be passing to the external systems, right? So, say for example, if there is a bad job ended or cancelled or failed, we send some field information to the external system. So, can we customize that business event to have some more additional information? Like, I hope that is possible, right?
Yes, that is absolutely possible. So there is a docs article where you can extend standard payloads, but you have to be careful on what you want to add and don't make that payload too heavy, because if you add, let's say, another 20 fields in the standard payload, only having 5, then it's not right use of that platform. But yes, you can extend standard schemas. You can also create your own business events using X++. Thank you. Yes, Amanpreet, the video will be available on our YouTube channel. We'll share the links. All right, so what I'll do is quickly take another minute to talk about what's coming next. So the next session is on dual right and virtual entities, which will be presented by Amna Khan and 𝗤𝗀𝘁𝗺𝗏 on 16th of October, which is next Saturday at 3:30 p.m. AEDT, same as today's session's time. So if you guys want to learn from Amna and 𝗤𝗀𝘁𝗏 on using these virtual entities and dual right frameworks, join that session. I think 𝗤𝗀𝘁𝗏 is one of the early adopters of dual right. He is probably one of the person, or I can say on the planet, who has done a lot of work on dual right. So make the best use of his time next weekend. 𝗤𝗀𝘁𝗏 is coming and Amna is joining him, and Amna is also a very sharp technical person. I know her well and really regard her knowledge in this space. So join us next week on dual right and virtual entities. And with that, I would like to thank everyone for joining. Special thanks to everyone taking out the time on the weekend and joining us. Stay connected, keep following us, keep joining these sessions. It's for you. And this is a good platform to connect with the people. So final words, if anyone wants to unmute themselves, let us know. Give any feedback. Thanks, Patrick.
Yep. Rachit, this is Umesh and Cameron. Umesh this side. Cameron and I have worked together probably for 3 more years, almost 3 more years, 3-4 years almost. So it was very nice session. Cameron, very informative, and Rachit also. So and very excited to see that you guys are actually contributing more to the community. So thank you once again.
Thanks for saying hi, Umesh. It's great to hear your voice.
Same here.
Thanks, Umesh. Yes, Anas, we are seeing you. Yeah, Anas have a question that they have extended purchase order business event to add some fields in the payload. They are hearing it may not be a good practice, but was done to avoid OData callback to finance and operation. So I think, Anas, if it's working fine, adding 1 or 2 fields is not a major problem. If your business scenarios and integration testings are working nicely and you can avoid that callback to F&O, that's perfectly fine. Cool. All right, and thanks a lot, Cameron, for taking out your time, and we really appreciate your commitment to join this and share your knowledge with us. Your experience is really invaluable, and we have learned a lot. The way you explained was really nice. We all were, it's good that we are recording this session. I'm sure this will be played back multiple times by multiple people over and over again, because the way you have explained was really nice. So thanks for that. And I know you have been a bit sick last week, so a big applause for you to come forward and share your knowledge with us. Cool.
Thanks, Rachit, for the invite. I certainly appreciated it.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Rachit.
All right, then. We'll then close off the bridge. Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend. We'll see you soon on next week. Thank you.
See ya. Bye-bye.